and this will be the technical crash course on the Pi system. So we'll learn a little bit about what are the different product components of the Pi system. So let's drop into it. Like I said, this is track 2, or speech 2 in this track. You might have heard earlier Jeremy talk about the landscape of how the Pi system fits in to the data landscape. I'm going to be talking about all the different types of components we have when we talk about the Pi system. And after this, you'll hear about asset monitoring, specifically condition-based maintenance, as well as analytics. So please stick around. So what are we going to talk about in this talk? We have 4 different things we're going to talk about here. The first is, you might be wondering, what can you do with the Pi system? So we heard a little bit about this in Jeremy's talk, but we'll go into another example of what is the Pi system actually used for. Also, you might be wondering how you can describe this to your coworkers when you get back to the office. I'm sure a lot of you are dreading the question when you go back and they say, oh, I heard you went to a conference, tell me about it, right? So we'll give you a little speech to give to them so you can tell them what the Pi system is and what you learned about. We'll talk about what are the Pi system tools you should focus on. One thing you'll notice if it's your first time at this conference or you're new to Pi is that there are a lot of different tools out there. And so I'll kind of break down what the names of them are and what the functions of them are so you can have a better vocabulary to talk in Pi lingo, as Jeremy said. And then we'll also give kind of a brief how to navigate Pi World, what other talks you should check out, and some recommendations for the other days. So what can I do with Pi? We have 6 different main use cases for the Pi system. And one time I described the Pi system as, well, it's used in a lot of industries, and it's used for a lot of different things, right? And it's like, OK, cool. But that doesn't really, I don't know what to do with that information. So simplifying it into these 6 different areas is really helpful. We have asset health. So whether you want to understand how to implement condition-based maintenance to better predict when your assets are going to fail, that could be one use of the Pi system. We have energy efficiency, making sure that we're using our power and our water effectively so that we can reduce costs. We have process optimization, making sure that we hit those KPIs that our organization's really striving for. Regulatory compliance, we're making sure that we're within compliance of whatever government regulations are imposed upon us. Making sure we always deliver quality products, and we always do that safely and securely, making sure that anyone who works in our facilities are safe when they do so, because we want to make sure that they don't get injured. So in this talk, we're going to focus on one of them, and I'm going to talk about asset health. So to set the stage, all of us in this classroom right now, we're all new proud owners of a wind farm. So give yourself a pat on the back, a celebratory nod to like your neighbor. It's a really big news, I know. And so this wind farm is called Windtopia, okay? It's a famous wind farm. And so one of the problems we have is that we're not meeting our generation targets. So why are we not meeting? Why do we have this problem? So one of the reasons is that our availability is down. And this could be due to curtailment or unplanned downtime activities, and we'll look at how to resolve that. And our target is to really hit this 95% availability number for our wind farm, Windtopia, because we're all in this together, right? Good buy-in from the crowd. So how are we going to do this? We're going to find the biggest loss of production from all of our wind turbines. So we do this with the Pi system. So what we have here is a dashboard. Oops. Make sure the video's playing. OK. So we have a dashboard here. And this dashboard is built using Pi Vision. So the PyVision dashboard shows us the total production, the expected production, the turbines available, and the daily revenue for our entire organization. And we see that highlighted up at the top there. We also see that it breaks down our organization into different wind farms, such as the Black Mesa wind farm here. And we can see that the Black Mesa wind farm has low availability. So let's dive into it and actually identify what components of the Black Mesa wind farm are failing. And we'll notice that GE05 and GE06 turbines actually have the lowest availability. Now that we're in this particular site, we can drill down even further into the specific turbine to see if there's any events of interest, maybe some failures that occurred, and we can detect why those occurred. So we went from the organizational level down into the site level, and finally into the asset level to really look at what events have happened. And you can see highlighted here, we have individual events that occurred that indicate a failure of this particular turbine. And I think one of them here is high turbine temperature. So that could be one reason that the turbine failure occurs. So using the Pi system, we can build a dashboard like this using PyVision or some other tool. And we can really see how we can solve a problem like turbine availability within our wind farm. So that's great. But now we come to that question of, OK, how do I easily describe the Pi system? And this comes up a lot for me, kind of in the classic elevator pitch scenario, right? People are like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I work at a software company in the Bay Area. Oh, Google, right? Facebook? No, a smaller one. Airbnb? No. So I have to describe what OSIsoft does and what the Pi system is. And it's hard, right? I guess you don't have this problem, but I'll tell you, it's hard. And one of the reasons it's hard is because there's so many different use cases and so many different ways that we can solve different problems. So I'm going to go through one example now that you can use to help describe what the Pi system is to your coworkers. And the best way to do that is to actually think about what process do we do without the Pi system, and then what do we do with the Pi system, and how is it better? So let's compare creating this report. This is a lost revenue causes report for our Windtopia organization, okay? And I'm going to go through and create this. And I'll walk you through the process of how I would normally create this without the Pi system first. And so, did anyone go to the keynotes today? They were like this morning, hopefully a lot of you. So I took kind of a note from Mark Jeffries about I am the chief storyteller. And one way to make it a better story is to make it personal, right? So instead of just any engineer, that's me right there. That's my vacation face. And I'm equally as excited to create this, this report here for you guys today, OK? And so the first step in creating this report is to gather the turbine status data from each of our sites, the North Fork and the Springfield site. And so I met two of you in the audience earlier, so I'm looping you into this demo. So we have Lauren from the North Fork site. She likes tennis, and she likes hiking as well. And she's giving me this turbine data as status raw data, which is useful. And then I have Sohini. Interesting fact, she grew up in Zambia, Zimbabwe region. And she's giving me this turbine data as a downtime report. So a little bit different, but still useful, right? So that's step one. Then I have to come up with some way to convert that information into information that's useful to me. So I've created these downtime events, is what I'm calling them. And that's, I can convert from the status raw data or from the actual downtime report and get my downtime events. The next thing I need to do is collect meteorological data, because the wind speed, the weather, all of these have an impact on how a wind turbine functions. And then I also need to bring in the power curves from a corporate database. This could be a relational database like Jeremy talked about. And we use different turbine manufacturers across our organization in Windtopia, as I'm sure all of you know, as highly active employees. And so they're not all the same, and I need to incorporate that into my analysis. Next, I'll calculate the lost power for these downtime events. And then finally, I have this great report, right? Pie chart. And so my manager's like, great job, Jason. This looks great. Let's do it over like every week, right? And I'm like, oh boy, it's going to be fun. So that's really the power of the pie system is now instead of doing it starting from scratch every week, we can automate parts of that process. So the first is data collection. So that manual contact from Lauren and from Sohini is now automated. I don't have to talk to them anymore, which is sad, but it's great because I get more time back in my day, right? This automatic collection of data through the use of interfaces and connectors, which we'll talk about later, that's one of the powers of the pie system. Another is external database integration. So bringing in relational data into the pie system is also possible to allow me to have one system of record, one source of truth. And then finally, that generation of the report using whatever analytics I create, as well as actually creating the images and visuals that are in that report, that's also automatic with the power of the pie system. So I've shown you now how to describe the pie system in like a 100-floor elevator pitch, right? Like that was a pretty long explanation. But it's hard to really describe the power of it. And I hope that you feel a little bit better about engaging in a conversation like this with your coworkers about how you describe something that is supposed to be valuable when it's an infrastructure, when it's unseen, right? So let me go back, actually. So another question you might get, because they're so enraptured by your description of the pie system, is what's in that blue box, Jason? Like, what is this pie system infrastructure, right? You've heard it all today. You'll hear it all tomorrow, probably Thursday, maybe Friday if you're taking a lab. Good stuff. But that blue box encompasses a lot of different tools. And so now what I want to do, and what I want this focus of the talk to be, is what are the tools I need to succeed? And let's talk about what that blue box contains. So the first thing that I'll tell you is you don't ask what tool I need. You ask what type of solution you're looking for. So the types of solutions that we commonly hear, the scenarios, are collecting data from disparate systems, creating calculations for your assets of interest, identifying and capture important events within those assets, visualizing and sharing data, and deploying business intelligence, machine learning, AI, any of those advanced analytics use cases. So here's the pie system, and it's easily broken up into 3 different layers. We have the collect layer on the left here, and the collect layer is focused on grabbing all of that data from all of your data sources and pushing it into the pie server. The pie server is the focus of the middle layer, the store and enhance layer. And that's where all of the historization, as well as the added analytics, added metadata, all that's done in the pie server. And then finally, we have the deliver layer, which is where you're consuming the data, whether it be through our custom visualization tools or whether it be porting it out to some other tool. So going through those different scenarios one by one, what tool would I recommend if you're looking to collect data from disparate systems? I would say you want to focus on the pie connectors and pie interfaces, which are in that collect region of this 3 layers we talked about earlier. So for collect, we have these interfaces and connectors, and they're really focused on grabbing any type of time series and or metadata from any type of sensor or asset. And we have over 450 interfaces and connectors that really focus on all of the most common industrial protocols. So you might have heard of OPC, Modbus, any of these industrial protocols that are commonly used in the control space, or now in the IT realm. We have some interface or connector that can connect to that and bring the data into Pi. And then of the Pi server, this is broken up into a couple other components. So at the bottom here, we have the data archive. And the data archive is purpose-built to store time series data. So if you ever hear anyone referring to a historian, a time series historian, that's what the data archive is. And the data archive is useful for a machine to machine-friendly lingo, you know, T15s.pv. Who couldn't know what that is, right? But if you want to share that data with other members of your business and you want a more human-friendly terminology, you can add on human-friendly names and add on metadata, like Jeremy was talking about in the previous talk, in the asset framework, which is another component of the Pi server. So that really focuses on the collection piece. Next, if you wanted to create analytics, create calculations for your assets, we would use the asset framework and then add on top of it asset analytics. So when we think about asset framework, we think about the relationship between assets. So we have up here in the top, we have Windtopia, North Fork site, Rusty Bucket site, and Wind Turbine 1. And you can notice that they all have a parent-child relationship from each other. So Windtopia is our organization. We have various sites below that and various turbine assets below that. So this parent-child relationship is built in AF, and it's what really gives us that added value to the data that's coming in. We also have the ability to templatize our assets. So if I were to say, create 95 wind turbine assets, you might be like, wow, that's a lot of work. But if you were to make one template and then just copy it across all of these different assets, it's easy to minimize the work, because if I were to add 100 more wind turbines, I could simply reuse the same template. So those are some of the values of AF. And then once we add in our asset analytics feature to this discussion we're having, what we can do is we can build a real-time analytic on top of our turbine, and then we can deploy it to the entire fleet through the use of templates. So if I build it on one turbine, then it immediately gets deployed on all my other turbines that have that same turbine template. Really powerful stuff. And we also have a type of analysis called a roll-up analysis, which we can use to summarize or aggregate calculations and data from child assets into a parent asset. So if I wanted to roll up any of the data from my 95 wind turbines into, let's say, an average of that site, that would be the power of a roll-up analysis, and very easy to configure. Next, we'll go into how to identify and capture important events. So we add on another layer to the Pi server, and that's our event frames. So you might have heard Chris Nelson talk about this in his talk, which is if you ever have an event of interest, in our example for the wind turbine, it's a downtime event, right? You might want to set aside that period of time and capture a certain number of values, whether it be the temperature, the pressure, any of these operational data measurements that you want to capture in that time period. You can just set it aside as an event frame. And these are configurable. So you can configure it through a trigger, like a logic trigger. So if this is above a certain threshold, then evaluate to true, else false, some type of logic like that. Or you can have some external system dictate the triggering mechanism for you. And we integrate with a large range of systems, especially valuable for any of our pharmaceutical customers that deal a lot with batch data. And then lastly, once we have that time set aside, I can choose to send a notification, which is to send an email out to me or my team saying, oh, please look into this asset. It seems like there's a high temperature on this particular wind turbine. So the notification can then open up a link to a Pi Vision display like this. Okay? Next, we're going to talk about visualization and sharing data. And for this one, we have two tools we're going to talk about, the Pi Vision and Pi Datalink. And this really gets into the deliver side of our three-layer collect, store and enhance, and deliver. And Pi Vision is OSIsoft's flagship visualization tool. It's really focused on collaborating, so people can edit displays and share them with others in their organization. Very easy to access as well through a web browser, so anyone with a mobile phone or a tablet can also see the data. And it's really purpose-built to kind of show you your operational data. Unlike the report we talked about earlier, this one really updates in real time and allows people to see trends and traces as the data is collected, which is really powerful. Next, we have Pi Datalink, which is an Excel add-in which you can use to bring Pi system data into Excel. And this is really powerful if you're familiar with the spreadsheet and you want to take advantage of other Excel functionalities, which you can use to enhance the data further. And then finally, our last scenario to talk about, which is deploying business intelligence or AI, machine learning. And that's really the focus of our Pi integrators. And so there's a couple different talks throughout Pi World this week that you can go and see. And some of them are focused on the Pi integrators' preparation and cleaning of the data. So data preparation for a lot of these business intelligence initiatives is very lengthy and work intensive. So the integrators focus on cleaning up that, making the data preparation fast and easy by cleaning up the data and exporting it in a row by column format or some type of streaming format to any number of destinations. Some listed here are data warehouses, data lakes, messaging hubs, and geospatial data. And we have integrations with AWS, with Microsoft Azure, Azure ArcGIS, SAP HANA, the list goes on. So really powerful if you want to make use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, any of those business intelligence initiatives. Okay, so I know a lot of information packed into a small amount of time, but how do we navigate Pi World? So right now, like I said, you're in the technical crash course on the Pi system. Hopefully you took away how to describe the Pi system in a lengthy elevator pitch to someone. And if you stay in this room, you'll hear about asset monitoring and condition-based maintenance, as well as asset analytics. And if you stay till day 2, which hopefully you will, we have our industry day tomorrow. So it'll be focused on, there'll be different industry tracks for all of our different industries, like oil and gas, pharmaceutical, food and beverage, transmission distribution. So find the industry that you're interested in and go attend those tracks. And then day 3, we have our product tracks and labs. And for that, you'll get a deep dive into all these products that I've mentioned up here. It'll be even more technically in-depth on what those products do and the new development that's coming for all of those products. So here's my contact information. Like I said, my name's Jason. I don't know if I said this, but I work as a product marketing manager here at OSIsoft. Please come find me if you see me after the conference and introduce yourself. I'd love to just get feedback from you about how the conference is going, as well as what you thought of this talk. I'll buy you a beer at the free bar. So what questions do you have? Let's see if we have, yeah, it looks like we have about 5 minutes. So what questions? I'm blinded, so I can't see. Oh, yes.
Capabilities
Yeah.
of the Pi system. It sounds like you can do a lot of the things that, let's say, a SCADA system or a historian can do in terms of collecting data, historizing it. You can also analyze it too. But what about supervisory control? What about, so in other words, you can read and you can analyze data and you can generate events based on that data, but can you also write data to, let's say, end devices on a plant floor like a PLC or any other type of controllers?
Yeah, so we do offer some options to write out of the Pi system as well. There's our developer-focused tool set, which is really focused on grabbing the data and writing out. And then we do have some out-of-the-box solutions of like, for OPC, for instance, if you have an OPC server, we could just write directly to the OPC server. So it depends on the use case, but in general, yes. Other questions?
Ezekiel Vicent with KBC. If I understand correctly, the question was geared towards writing to a control system. If Pi can write, if anybody has access to Pi and they can write into a control system, can you put some sort of provisions in place to prevent anybody from writing into a system?
Yeah, so in terms of security, there's a couple different options to go. You can definitely prevent people writing to the control system because we don't want that, right? So there's built-in security to the different Pi system components that we would call, I guess, like Pi security, right? We have our own security that's built on a variety of technologies. But one of the best ways to do it is we actually offer like 2 versions of a lot of our interfaces and connectors that are read-only or read-write, which is to say that if you use the read-only one, then there's no capability to write back to the control system. And so you would never have that problem. So. Yeah?
Okay, you showed an example with a hierarchy where you had the sites and then the turbines under that. Is it possible to define several different hierarchies under which you can look at things? For example, I might want to look at it that way, but I might also want to look at it by turbine type and have those be my folders at the same time. How's that handled?
Yeah, so I don't have access to a live software demo right now, but the answer is yes. You can change the grouping and how you arrange the different elements. So right now, if I were to log on to this particular server, you could see like a plus and minus that would minimize and maximize at the Wintopia level. And that's grouped just alphabetically. But then you can also arrange by templates, or you can do your own groupings. And then there's also different databases is what we call them. So you can kind of group different sites together, or different projects, different initiatives. There's a lot of customization that can go into how you visualize this particular part of the hierarchy. Other questions?
What is the typical path forward if I just want to get historical reports out of the Pi system? Like a PDF for time range kind of thing?
Yeah, so if you would just, I think my recommendation would be to use Pi Datalink. So I think we talked about that. Let me bring it up here. Yeah, so Datalink would bring all of your Pi system data into Microsoft Excel, and then you can do whatever formatting you wish through that. And then you could save that as a variety of different sources or just copy paste it into whatever format you want. So this would probably be the easiest way to generate a quick report.
Look, I saw in there that it said that it could write to SAP. I was wondering, can it pull from SAP for like that asset framework in the dashboard you were talking about? Could it pull the functional locations and all the maintenance information from SAP back to the dashboard when you were making that?
Yeah, so yeah, I won't go to the dashboard. But yes, you'll need to, there's a little bit more configuration that goes on to kind of make that happen. But setting up any type of connection to an external source can be done pretty easily. The SAP that you saw was more pushing data out to SAP HANA. But through any of our data access tools, what we call them, you can bring data into the server. Yeah. Question over there? Thanks, Martin. I think that'll be our last question after that.
Hi, Steve with Duke Energy. Many of these tools that you have really require on the asset framework to be in place in order to use them. If you haven't already built out that asset framework and have many millions of tags in your fleet, that can be very difficult to build the asset framework to start using these tools. Is there any kind of capability that you have for speeding up the building of asset frameworks for very large fleets of sensors?
Yeah, so the question is around how do we quickly build out the asset framework when we have a lot of data streams, right? So there's kind of two answers to that. The first is if you are collecting data from some source that supports a connector, like we talked about in the collect region, connectors will auto-build out your AF hierarchy. That's one of the features and the benefits of using them over an interface. So that's one answer, is you could use a connector. The other answer is that AF can be difficult to build out. And so my recommendation would be to pick a project, pick something small with a very defined scope, and start from there. We found most success with customers who define a particular initiative and have a very defined scope, whether it be, let me build out one template, I'll apply it to 50 assets, and I'll build one great analysis around it. And then after that, I can start evaluating whether or not this was effective. So really defining it more as like a project focus, where you do one small scope project is the best way. And if you talk to whoever your account manager is, maybe doing an AF Jumpstart, some service package to really get you going, or taking training could be a great way to get that conversation started. Yeah. Cool. So I think we're out of time for questions, but I'll hang around here for the next like 10 minutes if you want to come up, introduce yourself. Thank you so much, and hopefully you feel better elevator pitching the Pi system to people now.